Christmas Eve. The kind of night that used to mean warmth, laughter, and family. But not this year. Not for Michael Carter. The lights in the Whitmore house shimmered like gold wrapping paper scattered across the carpet. Wine glasses catching the glow of the chandelier. And music playing just loud enough to hide the tension underneath. Laughter rolled through the room. But it wasn't the kind that comes from love. It was the kind that feeds on mockery. Michael sat quietly at the far end of the table, half smiling at the jokes he didn't find funny. The air smelled of pine, perfume, and arrogance. Laura, his wife, was radiant as always. Beautiful. Confident. Every strand of hair in place. But her eyes carried something new tonight. Something colder. She stood suddenly, her red dress catching the light. A glass of champagne in hand. "Everyone," she said, voice slicing through the chatter. "I have an announcement." Her mother leaned forward eagerly. Her father already raised his glass, expecting some grand family toast. Michael glanced at her. His brow furrowed. He knew that tone. He'd heard it before in arguments that started softly and ended in silence. Laura smiled, the kind of smile that can wound without words. "I'm finally divorcing Michael." The words hit the room like a slap. For one still heartbeat, no one moved. Then came the laughter. Her mother gasped, not in shock, but delight. "Oh, honey." Finally, she said, "I told you. You were too good for him." Her father chuckled, lifting his glass. "To new beginnings," her brother whistled. "Guess Christmas came early for you, sis." Michael sat still. The smile on his face never changed. But his eyes told a different story. He wasn't broken. He wasn't angry. He was watching, memorizing every word, every laugh, every smirk. Laura turned toward him, emboldened by the chorus of approval. "Oh, come on, Michael. You knew this was coming. My boss treats me like the man you could never be. He takes me to real restaurants, drives a real car, and actually listens." Her father laughed. "Well, can't say she's wrong about that, Camry. Son." The table erupted again. Glasses clinked. Laughter rose like a storm cloud. Michael's fingers tightened around the edge of his napkin, not from rage, but restraint. He looked at her once, calmly, as though seeing her for the very first time. And then he asked, voice steady and low, "Are you sure this is what you want?" She rolled her eyes. "Please, don't make this dramatic. You and I both know I've been done for a long time." Her mother nodded approvingly. "Let her live. Michael, you can't hold on to what's already gone." He didn't argue. He didn't explain himself. Instead, he reached for his coat draped over the back of the chair. He buttoned it carefully, one button at a time. Each click of the fabric echoed louder than the laughter around him. He stood. The music still played. Someone said something about dessert. No one really noticed that the air had shifted, that the warmth in the room suddenly felt heavy. He picked up his car keys, turned to Laura, and said quietly, "I hope your new life treats you the way you treated me." Her smirk faltered. Just for a second, the laughter thinned. He walked toward the door, his footsteps steady. No raised voice, no accusations, no begging. Just silence, clean, cold, final. He didn't slam the door. He didn't look back. But the moment it closed, something inside that house changed. The silence he left behind was heavier than all their laughter combined. For a long second, no one spoke. Then her father cleared his throat. "Well, that was dramatic." Her mother raised her glass again, forcing a smile, to Laura's freedom. And once again, they cheered. But this time, the sound didn't quite fill the room. It bounced off the walls, hollow and unsure, because none of them could shake the look in Michael's eyes, that quiet, unreadable calm. Outside, the snow fell harder. Michael's breath fogged in the cold night air as he reached his car. The street glowed with red and green lights, reflections dancing across the windshield like ghosts of a happier time. He slid behind the wheel, started the engine, and sat there for a moment, hands still, eyes forward. Inside the house, they were still laughing. He could almost hear it through the glass, the kind of laughter that once made him feel like family. Now sharper, crueler, stripped of love. But as he pulled onto the street, that sound began to fade behind him. The tires whispered over the snow, and the heater hummed softly. The divorce papers sat on the passenger seat, still unsigned, a white envelope like a tombstone for everything he'd tried to build. He glanced at it once, then at the empty passenger seat beside him. Freedom, he muttered under his breath. That's what you wanted. The word lingered in the air. Heavy. Unfamiliar. Christmas lights blinked outside the window as he drove past each house, homes filled with laughter, warmth, and lies people told themselves just to get through another year. But Michael didn't feel anger. Not yet. What he felt was clarity, the kind that burns slow. The kind that turns humiliation into resolve. When he reached his quiet neighborhood, the world had gone still. No more laughter, no noise, just snow. He parked in the driveway, turned off the engine, and sat in the dark. For the first time that night, a faint smile crossed his lips, not of joy, not of triumph, but of understanding. They thought they had broken him. They thought the silence meant surrender. But silence has never been weakness. It's patience. It's calculation. It's the sound a storm makes before it breaks. Voiceover. He didn't shout. He didn't beg. But the silence he left behind, that was the sound of a storm beginning. The road home was empty, blanketed in white. Street lights painted pale circles on the snow, and the hum of Michael's tires was the only sound for miles. The laughter from the house still echoed faintly in his mind, tinny, cruel, unreal. It didn't hurt anymore. It just replayed like a memory from another life. Inside the car, the heater whispered softly. His hands were steady on the wheel, his breath even. The kind of calm that doesn't come from peace but from something colder. When he reached home, he didn't rush to turn on the lights. The house glowed faintly from the embers still alive in the fireplace. He hung his coat, loosened his tie, and for the first time that night, exhaled. The silence was heavier here, but it belonged to him. He poured a glass of whiskey. The amber liquid caught the firelight as he raised it to his lips. It burned the way truth does, slow, honest, final. The divorce papers lay on the table, her handwriting curling across the page like a wound. He stared at them for a long time, then whispered, "You wanted freedom. Laura, I'll give it to you completely." The glass clinked softly as he set it down. On the wall, a photo still hung, taken years ago. Laura laughing, leaning against him, their hands covered in flour from the pie they'd baked together their first Christmas as husband and wife. He'd kept it there, thinking love could outlast disappointment. Now it looked like a relic from a story that never happened. He sat by the fire, watching the flames bend and breathe. His reflection shimmered on the window, faint and distant, and in that reflection, the past began to return quietly. Like ghosts crossing snow, he saw her as she once was, a waitress in a downtown cafe. Hair tied back, eyes full of fire. She had spilled wine on his shirt. Mortified, he'd only laughed. "It's just a suit," he'd said. "You're working hard. No harm done." That moment had been the start. Late night talks, cheap coffee, dreams whispered between shifts. He thought he'd found a partner, a heart that didn't care about the world's games. But slowly, he noticed the change. The way she flinched when friends asked what he did for a living. The way her mother's smile faded every time his old Toyota pulled into their driveway. Her father once said it outright. "A man's worth is measured by what he provides." "Michael, and you seem content being average." Michael had smiled politely, then spent that night lying awake beside Laura, wondering if average was all she saw too. He'd given her comfort, loyalty, a life without drama. What she wanted was flash status, admiration, the illusion of more. He mistook her hunger for ambition. He thought he could love her into contentment. But you can't fill a heart that only opens for applause. The clock ticked once. The sound was deep, certain. Michael stood and crossed the room to the old desk against the wall. He opened the top drawer. Inside lay a stack of folders, discreet, organized, untouched since before the marriage began. A silver keycard glinted beneath the paper, embossed with a name she never knew, Harrison Group Holdings. He traced the letters with his thumb, a faint smile crossing his lips. For years he'd kept his true life separate, a decision born from the lessons his father taught him. If they love you for the mask, you'll never know if they love the man beneath it. So he'd hidden the empire behind plain shirts and calloused hands, He let people assume he was ordinary because it filtered the world. It revealed who stayed for love and who stayed for the lifestyle. Tonight had given him every answer he'd ever needed. He placed the card on top of the divorce papers. Side by side, the life she threw away, and the power she never knew she mocked. The fire cracked once. Snow tapped gently at the windows. Michael poured another drink. Slower this time, voice soft. Almost like prayer. You wanted a better man. Laura. You should have learned what better means. He leaned back in the chair, watching the flames dance across the documents, the quiet symbols of both his restraint and his reach. Outside, the wind began to rise. Inside, he smiled, a small, knowing smile. The kind a man wears when he's already decided what comes next. Because storms don't announce themselves. They just wait until it's time. Morning arrived, cold and colorless. The kind of gray that makes even the sun look tired. Michael woke before dawn. The house was silent except for the ticking of the old clock and the faint hum of the heater pushing against the winter air. He brewed his coffee the way he always did, black. Bitter. No sugar. The world outside still slept. Inside, something else was waking. The divorce papers sat neatly beside his phone, as if waiting for a witness. He didn't touch them. Not yet. He preferred things to end properly, not with shouting, not with revenge that burned too hot, but with order, precision. He sipped his coffee and stared out the window. Snow covered everything, the trees, the mailbox. Even the footprints he'd left last night were gone. A clean slate. Perfect. He picked up the phone. The first call went to his financial advisor, Alan. A man who'd known him long enough never to ask questions. Alan, Michael said, his tone calm, steady. Morning. Sir. The voice replied, I assume we're handling the asset transfer next week. Something simpler today. Michael said, freeze every card tied to the Whitmore family trust. Both accounts. There was a short pause. The Whitmore trust. That's your wife's parents. Correct. Ex-wife. Michael corrected. Softly. Effective immediately. No hesitation followed. Just quiet professionalism. Understood? Sir. I'll see to it now. Michael ended the call. No explanation. No satisfaction. Just one clean stroke across the board. He poured another half cup of coffee. Steam curled in the air. The room smelled of roasted beans and winter silence. The second call was to Human Resources. A different tone. A different kind of cut. Good morning, Mr. Harrison. Came the cheerful voice on the other end. He could hear the shuffle of paperwork, the hum of an office coming to life. Morning, he replied. There's been a staffing change in marketing. I want both Mark and Amy Whitmore released. Effective immediately. The voice hesitated. Mark and Amy. Are those? Yes. Michael interrupted gently. Those Whitmores. Handle it quietly. No explanations. Full severance. Nothing more. Understood. Sir. I'll take care of it personally. He thanked her politely, ended the call, and set the phone back on the table. The clock ticked again. 2 calls down. 1 more to go. The third number he dialed was longer. Older, the kind reserved for those who never appear on company websites. The line clicked once before a man answered. Compliance Division. The voice said, This is Director Hale. This is Michael Harrison. He replied, Initiate a full audit on Weston Realty's general manager. Blake Foster. Blake Foster. Hale repeated, voice tightening with awareness. Understood. Sir. Shall we include client relations? Yes. Michael said, his tone still calm, almost detached. Add Laura Harrison to the review. No severance. File it under ethical conduct. A moment of silence hung between them. The kind of silence that carries weight. Consider it done. Hale said finally. Should I notify legal? Not yet. Michael replied. Let the dust rise first. He ended the call. The phone screen dimmed to black, reflecting his face in the faint morning light, expressionless. Controlled. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning. He was thinking. Most people confuse anger with power. But Michael knew better. Anger makes noise. Power moves quietly. He set the phone aside and leaned back in his chair. Outside, a snowplow rumbled faintly in the distance, clearing the road for the day ahead. Inside, His road was already clear. He reached for the pen lying next to the papers. The same pen Laura had used to sign away their life together. He turned it slowly in his fingers, almost thoughtfully, voice soft, more to himself than to anyone. You wanted a man who could give you the world. You just didn't realize you were already living in his. He signed his name at the bottom of the page, neat, deliberate, final. Ink drying like a seal on the end of something sacred. Then he stood, stretched, and walked toward the window. The world beyond the glass glimmered white, untouched, unknowing, somewhere. Her family would be waking up to find their cards declined, their pride suddenly costing more than they could afford. Somewhere. Her lover would be checking his phone, reading the audit notice that would crack open the life he'd built on charm and deceit. And somewhere, Laura would still be asleep, blissfully unaware that the man she'd mocked for being ordinary had just rewritten the story of her life. Michael took another sip of his coffee. It had gone cold, but he didn't mind. There was a strange peace in the quiet, the peace that comes only after the decision's been made. After the first domino falls, he set the mug down gently and whispered, almost to the silence itself, "Revenge doesn't need noise, only precision." Outside, the snow kept falling soft, endless, silent. And beneath that silence, a reckoning had already begun. Evening fell over the Whitmore house again, the same golden glow, the same music, the same laughter that had once felt untouchable. Laura stood in the center of it all, a glass of wine in her hand. Basking in the warmth of her family's admiration, they celebrated her freedom, her fresh start, her new life. To them, the divorce was victory proof that she'd traded up. Her father raised his glass. To new beginnings, her mother laughed. To Laura, finally living the life she deserves. They clinked glasses. The sound was crisp, confident, the sound of people who had no idea they were standing on the edge of ruin. Then it happened. Small, quiet, and almost forgettable until it wasn't. The doorbell rang. Her father pulled his wallet from his jacket to pay for the cake he'd ordered. He smiled at the delivery boy, handed over his platinum card, and waited for the familiar beep. Instead, he heard a flat tone. Declined. He frowned. Try it again. The delivery boy did. Beep. Declined. Her father chuckled awkwardly. Must be the machine. He reached for another card, her mother's this time. Beep. Declined. Again. The laughter around the table faded. Her siblings exchanged uneasy glances. Her mother's smile faltered. That can't be right. Then, like clockwork, two phones buzzed at once. Mark and Amy, Laura's younger siblings. They both looked down. The color drained from their faces. What is it? Laura asked, irritation creeping into her tone. Mark swallowed hard. Email from work. Amy's voice trembled. We've been terminated. Effective immediately. The room went still. Her father blinked. Terminated for what? Neither of them answered. They were staring at their screens, frozen in disbelief. Then Laura's phone began to ring. Her heart jumped. She looked down. The call was from her office. Weston Realty. Her tone softened automatically as she answered. Hi. This is Laura. A pause. Then a careful voice on the other end. Mrs. Harrison. This is Human Resources. I'm calling to inform you that your position as Client Relations Manager has been terminated. Effective immediately. Please check your company email for further details. Laura's voice cracked. Terminated. There must be some mistake. I'm sorry. Ma'am, the voice said gently. It was an executive directive. Orders from above. The line went dead. The room around her blurred. Her hand trembled. Wine spilling down the stem of the glass. Her father's voice broke the silence. What the hell is going on? No one had an answer. Only questions heavy. Terrifying questions. Who could do all this in one day? Her mother whispered. Mark looked up. Pale. Someone with power. Amy added quietly. Someone who was never the man we thought he was. The words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. Laura's breath hitched. For the first time, fear slithered cold through her chest. She grabbed her keys and coat, ignoring their questions, their confusion, their voices calling after her. She drove into the snow, headlights slicing through the dark. Her hands gripped the wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. Streetlights flashed past like ghosts. Every mile felt longer than the last. She didn't know where else to go. So she drove to Blake's penthouse, the man who promised her luxury, love, and a new beginning. Her supposed upgrade. When he opened the door, he looked different. Not charming. Not confident. Nervous. Pale. Blake. She gasped. Something's happening. My parents' cards got declined. My siblings were fired. And her voice broke. I just lost my job. He ran a hand through his hair. Pacing. I know. What do you mean? You know, there's an audit, he said. Voice low. Someone powerful's after me. They're combing through every file. Every transaction. She shook her head. That's impossible. You said you were untouchable. His laugh was hollow. Apparently not. Before she could speak again, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his expression collapsed. He turned on the TV. The news anchor's voice cut through the silence. Breaking story. Weston Realty General Manager Blake Foster is under investigation for corporate fraud, following an internal audit authorized by the executive board. Laura's heart stopped. The screen showed Blake's photo, his name, the company's logo, everything unraveling in real time. She looked at him, eyes wide. Blake. What did you do? He didn't answer. He just stared at the floor. Her phone buzzed again, message after message lighting up the screen. Friends, colleagues, gossip channels. Every word was the same investigation. Audit. Collapse. She dropped the phone. It hit the marble floor. Screen cracking like the life she thought she'd built. Her whole world. The wealth. The status. The security she had traded her marriage for was dissolving. Piece by piece. Right before her eyes, the laughter that once filled her nights was gone. In its place, there was only silence. And somewhere in that silence, she began to understand the man she'd mocked wasn't ordinary. He was the storm she'd invited in. The courthouse smelled of paper, polish, and cold air. Outside, snow was melting into gray slush. The kind that sticks to your shoes and reminds you how quickly something pure can turn dirty. Laura sat at the plaintiff's table, posture stiff, expression carefully composed. But behind the makeup and perfume, exhaustion showed. The past few weeks had stripped away her sparkle. Her family avoided reporters. Her phone no longer buzzed with invitations. Her new life had gone quiet, too quiet. Across the room sat Michael. No lawyer's theatrics. No dramatic glares, just calm. Steady composure. His dark suit was plain, almost modest. He looked like any other man signing away a marriage that had already died. The judge's voice was formal, detached. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, you've agreed to a no-contest divorce. No alimony. No claims from either side. Yes. Your Honor, Laura replied, her voice steady but hollow. Michael nodded. That's correct. The judge stamped the file, his gavel striking once clean. Final. The divorce between Michael and Laura Harrison is hereby granted. Both parties are free to move on with their separate lives. Free. The word echoed through the courtroom like a verdict heavier than the gavel itself. Michael stood, buttoned his coat, and offered the judge a polite nod. Laura watched him, waiting for a glance, a word. Anything, but he didn't look her way. He simply gathered his papers and walked out. For a moment, she stayed seated, her hands gripping the edge of the table. She had won. Technically. But somehow, it felt like she'd just lost something she hadn't yet understood. When she finally stepped outside, the world erupted in noise. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps. Cameras flashed. Questions flew through the cold air. She frowned, confused. The media had no reason to be here for an ordinary divorce. Then she heard it, the low, smooth hum of engines. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a stop at the curb, followed by 3 SUVs in perfect formation. The doors opened at once. Men in tailored suits stepped out, executives she recognized, faces she'd seen at company dinners, charity galas, business functions she'd once attended as Blake's guest. Men who had called her ma'am. Men who had once answered to her family. They weren't looking at her now. They were walking toward Michael. One of them, a tall man with gray hair and a familiar watch worth more than her car, extended his hand. Congratulations, Mr. Harrison. On your freedom. The world went silent. Even the reporters hesitated. Laura froze. The name hung in the air, louder than any headline. Mr. Harrison, her voice cracked. Mr. Harrison. Michael, he turned to her, his expression calm, eyes colder than the snow. You never asked who I really was, he said quietly. You only asked what I could buy. Her throat tightened. All those nights, she'd mocked him for being ordinary. All those times she'd compared him to her boss. And now, the truth stood before her in flesh and silence. The executives waited beside the car, heads bowed slightly. The way men stand before authority. Laura stepped forward, tears slipping past her lashes. Please, she whispered. I was wrong. I didn't know. He looked at her for a long moment. And for the first time, there was no anger in his eyes, only distance. You wanted a man with power, Laura, he said softly. Now you've met him. Then he turned and stepped into the car. The door closed with a soft thud, a sound so gentle, yet final enough to end a lifetime. Engines rumbled. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions that no one would answer. The convoy pulled away through the snow, leaving her standing on the courthouse steps, small, shaking, and surrounded by a noise that couldn't fill the silence he left behind. And as the cars disappeared into the city, she realized what Michael had meant that night when he said, I hope your new life treats you the way you treated me, because now, it was 6 months later, winter had given way to spring. The snow that once buried everything in silence had melted into the soft green of new beginnings. Michael sat on his porch, the evening sun resting on his shoulders, the quiet hiss of the grill filling the air. The world had gone still again, not from pain, not from loss, but from peace. He turned a steak with slow, steady movements, with the same patience that had carried him through everything, the same calm that had once been mistaken for weakness. The house behind him was warm now. No tension in the walls, no sharp words echoing through the rooms, just stillness, the kind that means you finally own your life again. He'd rebuilt piece by piece, not with money, not with revenge, but with clarity. The company ran smoother than ever. His employees respected him, not because of the name, but because of the way he led, quiet, firm, fair. Every man who worked under him knew what dignity looked like now. He took a sip of his drink and smiled faintly, remembering Laura's laughter that Christmas night, the smug tilt of her chin, the way everyone cheered, as if cruelty was a kind of sport. He didn't hate her anymore. Hate takes energy, and he'd spent enough of that on people who never deserved it. She was gone somewhere out there, probably still trying to find someone else to blame. But that was no longer his concern, because peace isn't about erasing the past. It's about accepting what it taught you. She mistook silence for weakness. But silence was power waiting for purpose. Betrayal doesn't define you, your response does. The camera of life had turned. And now it was his story again, not the one they wrote for him, but the one he chose to live. He looked out toward the horizon, the sky streaked with gold. And in that quiet, he spoke not to anyone in particular, but to every man who's ever been where he was. Brothers, if you were me, would you have forgiven her, or let the truth speak louder than revenge? A pause. The wind moved through the trees like an answer. Tell me in the comments, he said softly. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories where men lose everything and rise stronger than ever.